What if Palpatine gave up on the revenge of the Sith? What would happen then? Let's find out. Ages before the first structures rose on Coruscant, 5 beings whose social anxieties had grown unbearable chose to merge their consciousness with the Force itself, ostensibly to maintain balance following a great war, but in truth to escape the necessity of interaction entirely. Their neuroses infected the cosmic energy permanently. Most Force sensitives inherited traces of this contamination, but dark side practitioners became catastrophically susceptible. The elaborate personas, the theatrical violence, the masks and tattoos, all of it compensation, attempts to reframe crippling social inadequacy as menace. The Jedi recognized this fundamental weakness and responded with sustained mockery. Thus began the rivalry that would destabilize the galaxy across countless generations. The pattern remained consistent. The Sith existed, the Jedi mocked them, and the Darksiders, incapable of articulating coherent responses, defaulted to screaming, Force lightning, and violence. They lost consistently. Coordination proved impossible when even basic communication between Sith devolved into murder, the act requiring less social navigation than conversation. Then, 1,000 years before the Clone Wars, the Jedi attempted a different approach. They challenged the Sith leadership of that era, who had designated themselves the Dark Council, apparently determined to eliminate any ambiguity about their commitment to darkness, to a live HoloNet debate broadcast across the core worlds. History would remember it as the Rusan Debate. The Darksiders accepted, or rather found themselves unable to refuse. The Jedi had issued the challenge publicly, framing any declination as confirmation of cowardice. Trapped between the terror of public speaking and the humiliation of retreat, the Sith leaders chose what seemed the marginally less mortifying option. Historical records indicate the Dark Council disappeared into the Force during the closing statements, their humiliation reaching levels incompatible with continued physical existence. The remaining Sith scattered into hiding. The Rusan Debate ended what warfare could not. The Jedi-Sith Wars concluded. The Sith Order, for all practical purposes, ceased to exist. However, unknown to the Jedi, one Sith persisted and vowed revenge. Darth Bane attributed the Order's collapse to a structural flaw. Sith in groups couldn't coordinate. The rule of 2 emerged from this analysis: master and apprentice, nothing more. Upon the apprentice's ascension, the old master would be eliminated. Bane taught that more than 2 Sith occupying the same space led inevitably to murder, the awkwardness proving insurmountable. The system endured. 10 strange centuries later, Sheev Palpatine reached the Chancellorship, managing his condition through an array of coping mechanisms. He unfocused his vision when crowds approached, avoided eye contact while gazing upward in what observers interpreted as contemplative wisdom, techniques refined over decades of Senate navigation. The Trade Federation's invasion of Naboo served the Sith Grand Plan. Qui-Gon Jinn and Obi-Wan Kenobi brought Queen Amidala to Coruscant, where she called for a vote of no confidence in Chancellor Valorum, that insufferable extrovert. Palpatine had secured what he needed. When the Jedi returned to Naboo with the Queen afterward, their mission was immaterial to his designs. Yet Palpatine deployed Darth Maul to intercept them anyway. The alternative, keeping Maul on Coruscant, had become intolerable even by Sith standards. His apprentice discussed nothing but revenge against the Jedi, not from genuine conviction, but because he had nothing else to discuss. Silence amplified his anxiety. Palpatine could only nod and hum for so long. He needed an excuse to send Maul off-world. On Naboo, Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan recognized what stood before them. Like their predecessors, they responded to the Sith with mockery, targeting Maul's elaborate facial tattoos and what Qui-Gon identified as the compensatory dimensions of his double-bladed lightsaber. The Sabrak attempted an acrobatic maneuver, desperate to force them to take him seriously. Mid-flip, his anxiety-corrupted motor cortex misfired catastrophically. Scarlet Sparkles, the name he'd given his weapon, removed all 4 of his limbs in under 2 seconds, leaving him supine and limbless on the floor. Qui-Gon's amusement turned fatal. He retrieved the Zabrak's fallen weapon, mimicking the Sith's earlier theatrical stance to Obi-Wan's renewed laughter. While examining the unusual hilt, attempting to locate the activation mechanism, both Jedi became sufficiently distracted. Maul sensed the opportunity through the Force. He saw the older Jedi hold the saber with its emitter pointed directly at his own chest. The Sith summoned what little social courage he possessed. He'd installed voice activation systems within the weapon because it made him feel as though Scarlet Sparkles was someone he could talk to without judgment. "Ignite Sparkles," he called out. The blade erupted through the Jedi Master's chest. Qui-Gon, recognizing the undignified nature of his death, instructed Obi-Wan to fabricate a more heroic narrative and to train the boy. Returning him to Tatooine would create an awkward situation for everyone involved. Then Qui-Gon died. Obi-Wan eliminated what remained of Maul, who seemed relieved the entire awkward affair had finally ended. For Palpatine, the news from Naboo initiated complete psychological collapse. If a Sith trained since infancy couldn't defeat a Jedi Padawan, then the teachings were worthless, and the master who delivered them a fraud unworthy of the Sith lineage. Depression consumed him. He withdrew from Senate appearances, from governance, from the Sith Grand Plan itself, though he remained functional enough to serve as a vessel for Count Dooku's directives. Masameda assumed practical control as Vice-Chancellor, while the official narrative portrayed Palpatine as diligently focused on classified security matters, demanding his full attention. The arrangement persisted for a decade. Then Palpatine vanished from his residence one morning. Coruscant security forces located him a week later after investigating a speeder collision with a lower-level spice den. They extracted him unconscious from the wreckage, saturated with cheap spirits, surrounded by empty cans of industrial paint thinner and adhesive solvent. Security cameras and bystander datapads cammed the scene from multiple angles. Support for the Chancellor evaporated after the spice den incident. The Senate vote for removal was unanimous. The trial consumed 3 days. Palpatine offered no testimony, no objection, no acknowledgement. Supreme Justice Voss sentenced him to 5 years at a facility near Lake Paunga on Naboo, citing his dissociative state and decades of prior service. Padme Amidala assumed the chancellorship. She possessed the connections, the reputation, the resources. The transition was inevitable. Count Dooku, now sole steward of the Grand Plan, contacted assassins. Palpatine had become a liability. Dawn mist obscured the Republic Judiciary Central Detention Center's transport pad. Chancellor Amidala stood at the edge of the Permacrete platform, flanked by her official guard detail, unwilling to miss this moment. 10 years prior, her call for a vote of no confidence had elevated Palpatine to the chancellorship. Now she occupied that office while he shuffled toward a prison transport in restraints. The arc from power to humiliation complete. Guards led Palpatine toward the waiting shuttle, a 40-meter diplomatic transport. The vessel never cleared the pad. The explosion tore through the transport, seconds after the boarding ramp sealed, the blast wave throwing nearby personnel to the ground. Emergency crews arrived within minutes to find the shuttle reduced to scattered debris, its passengers and crew vaporized, a total of 13 beings. And so ended the tragedy of Darth Sidious the Broken. Chancellor Amidala stood unharmed at her observation point, positioned far enough from the platform to avoid the blast. Had her own operatives acted prematurely? No, Sabe would never deviate from instructions. The plan had been specific. Palpatine would disappear from the Lake Paunga facility, and she would track him through her hunting reserve on Naboo with her handmaidens. A shuttle explosion on Coruscant wasn't part of it. Someone else had acted, but why would anyone bother assassinating a disgraced former chancellor, being shipped off to rot in prison? Perhaps some debt to a criminal syndicate, some unresolved grudge from his years navigating the Senate's darker corners. Yet the more useful explanation, and the more likely one, involved Count Dooku. The Separatist leader had the resources, the motive to destabilize her administration before it solidified. Whether it had actually been Dooku mattered less than what the narrative could accomplish. She had been the target. That would be the official conclusion. The story gained immediate traction throughout the Republic, despite Dooku's denials. The assassination bore the sophistication of coordinated planning, explosives, timing, infiltration of a secure facility. Only someone with the Count's wealth and resources could execute it, and certainly not without collaborators within the Senate itself. The implication unsettled her opposition. Senators outside the Chomel Directorate might have facilitated the attack against their political opponent. Emergency security legislation followed within days. The centerpiece, a 1,456-page omnibus package, restructured the Republic Security Bureau to report directly to the Chancellor's office and granted operational authorities under parameters so deliberately ambiguous they invited interpretation rather than compliance. Anyone attempting to parse the document's dense legal architecture and bureaucratic nomenclature had already demonstrated a fundamental misunderstanding of what they were witnessing. Senators who had served in the chamber long enough to recognize the mechanisms of control didn't need to examine a single clause. The vote passed. None wished to risk the suspicion that would accompany a dissenting vote, not when accusations of treason still hung over the chamber, undefined but understood. Dooku now stood as the Republic's existential threat. Her opposition cowed, her coalition empowered to act without constraint. The only disappointment was not being the one to kill Palpatine herself, but one couldn't be greedy. His death had accelerated her consolidation by years, delivering the RSP, surveillance infrastructure, and climate of fear that would have required years of careful maneuvering to secure otherwise. Having survived what the Republic firmly believed was an assassination attempt, Padme withdrew to Naboo, a strategic retreat framed as security precaution. During her tenure as queen, she had led the retaking of Theed and ordered Viceroy Gunray's public quartering. The military victory and execution transformed her from elected monarch to planetary hero. She wielded that mandate to reframe Naboo's conquest as intolerable weakness, casting opponents of her subsequent militarization as enablers unwilling to prevent another invasion. Opposition evaporated. She converted Naboo into a fortress, surveillance networks and military installations, making it among the sector's most defended worlds. Dooku posed no threat to her there. The Jedi Council, ever mindful of their relationship with the Senate and the funding that sustained the Order, insisted on providing protection during her retreat. Political theater as much as security, but Padme saw opportunity. The RSB answered to her directly, but the Jedi maintained institutional autonomy, at least in appearance. Cultivating connections within the Order was valuable. The Council assigned Obi-Wan Kenobi and Anakin Skywalker. They just returned from settling some turf dispute somewhere, apparently. Padme vaguely recalled them from the occupation. She'd been too focused on retaking her throne to notice much else, though the image of Qui-Gon Jinn, now deceased, remained clear. The Force doesn't work on you, eh? Well, let's see if Force does, he'd said to that Toydarian before grabbing him by the wings, slamming him to the floor and beating him to death with a droid part. The Force told me to do it, he'd explained to her and Jar Jar afterward. Upon their first meeting, Anakin declared, "You've grown more beautiful. For a Chancellor, I mean." Padme laughed as they shook hands. "Thank you, Annie. That's a high bar, given who our last Chancellor was." The journey to Naboo proceeded without incident. Upon arrival, Padme's convoy made directly for Varikino, her lakeside villa far from Theed's administrative bustle. Republic security established a defensive perimeter. 2 warships, each over a kilometer in length, maintained orbital positions, conducting continuous scans across thermal and electromagnetic wavelengths. Shuttles deployed into surrounding valleys for ground coverage. KX-series droids patrolled the grounds, armed guards occupied every entrance and vantage point, and layers of thermal scanners, motion detectors, and aerial reconnaissance droids blanketed the property. Combined with Naboo's existing militarized defenses, the estate had become one of the galaxy's most secure locations, which meant everyone could finally relax. By nightfall, the celebration was in full swing. Padme's former senatorial security detail, unassigned while she deliberated on a replacement senator for the Chomel sector, mingled with her staff and political allies from Coruscant. They toasted her survival and ascension to the chancellorship. Anakin remained close to Padme throughout the evening. She initially attributed it to overenthusiastic duty, a Jedi taking his first chancellor assignment too seriously. As the night progressed and guests either passed out or retreated into quiet conversations, the music softening to something atmospheric, Anakin asked if they could speak privately on a balcony overlooking the lake. She agreed. This wasn't duty. Something was weighing on him. Still riding the high of her victory, she found herself willing to indulge whatever he needed to say. The midnight air carried a chill off the water. 3 moons occupied different positions overhead, 2 near the horizon at opposing angles, the third higher and smaller, bright enough to cast multiple shadows across the stone terrace. Anakin moved toward the railing at the edge, and Padme followed. Once there, she suddenly dropped into an exaggerated fighting stance, throwing playful punches at him, jab, jab, hook, circling around while he tried to speak. "What?" she asked, switching stances, shifting her weight side to side. "Come on, Anakin, what is it? What do you need? A speeder, a yacht, a stake in Theed engineering, a board seat somewhere, a trade route, your own cruiser, diplomatic immunity for life, a planet? What is it? This is the best day of my life. Whatever you want, ask and it's yours." "Padme, please," Anakin said gently. "I have something important to say. I've been wanting to tell you this for a while." She stopped her mock sparring, raising both hands in an exaggerated gesture of apology. Anakin gripped the thigh-high railing to his left, facing forward along the terrace. Padme moved in front of him, but turned toward the view, spreading her arms wide as though embracing the moonlight. The 3 moons hung in the sky ahead, over the water, spilling silver illumination across the lake. He saw her in profile against that light. "What is it, Anakin? Say it. I can't read minds." For a moment everything else fell away. Just her, the light, the stillness. He spoke. He'd been thinking about her constantly since Naboo. Every night he dreamed about her, couldn't focus on training, couldn't meditate without her appearing in his mind. Seeing her this morning, he couldn't breathe when she looked at him or said his name. His feelings had grown beyond anything he could control or suppress, no matter what the Jedi Code demanded. By the end, Padme stood with hands folded, silent. "You feeling okay?" she finally asked. Anakin nodded. Padme stepped closer and placed her hand on his forehead, as though checking for fever. "You sure?" "Yeah, Padme," he said. "I know what I said, and I meant it." She took her hand off his forehead, tapped her chin thoughtfully, then spoke. The drinks had caught up with her. She launched into something about jurisdictional boundaries and how the Jedi Temple's administrative procedures interface with senatorial committee structures, whether that creates conflicts with Republic Charter subsection 47 or was it 74. Then there was the matter of how hyperspace lane regulations affect diplomatic travel schedules, which obviously impacts availability matrices. Something about whether Coruscant zoning laws even permit cohabitation between different institutional frameworks, or if that requires variance applications through the Municipal Planning Commission. And the tax implications of cross-sector asset transfers when one party maintains residency in a religious institution exempt from standard property assessments, which might necessitate filing amendments under some revenue code she couldn't quite remember the number for. The depreciation schedules didn't align with the fiscal quarters, and that was before considering how senatorial disclosure requirements interact with Jedi confidentiality protocols, which reminded her of the Trade Federation's liquidity crisis during the Naboo blockade. Synthetic collateralized debt obligations backed by plasma exports that collapsed when the underlying commodity futures diverged from their hedged positions. The credit default swaps on those instruments created counterparty exposure across at least 17 banking cartels in the core, and when the intergalactic banking clan tried to stabilize things through quantitative easing protocols, they accidentally triggered a cascade of margin calls that destabilized the Ogean credit reserve's overnight lending rates. Something about how that affected the bid-ask spread on Republic Treasury bonds, which meant the yield curve inverted. And inverted yield curves historically preceded every major recession except the one after the Rusan Reformation, though that might have been because of how monetary policy interacted with Jedi Temple lending practices at the time, which brings up the question of whether the Senate Banking Committee even has oversight authority over Temple financial activities, or if that falls under the Judicial Department's purview, given their semi-autonomous status, which she'd raised during the Appropriations Subcommittee hearing 3 sessions ago, but Senator Orn Free-Taa kept filibustering with amendments about Ryloth trade preferences, and those amendments somehow got tied to the agriculture subsidies for Naboo plasma refineries, even though plasma isn't agricultural, but the procedural rules allow it if you invoke the Commerce Clause exemption under Article 8 of the Galactic Constitution, assuming the motion passes with a 3/5 majority unless someone objects on quorum grounds, which Senator Ask-Ak did once, and it completely derailed the entire legislative calendar for 2 months, because nobody could figure out if abstentions counted toward the quorum threshold or if they only counted for the final vote tally. And that discrepancy actually goes back to competing interpretations of... She rambled on for another minute or two before Anakin interrupted. "Padme?" "Yes, Anakin?" "What are you saying?" She caught herself, remembered what was actually happening, and tried again. "Look, Anakin, you'd be better off with another Jedi. Trust me, I'm not easy to be around. I rarely get time off work. I'm always distracted, and that gets exhausting for people. Plus there's the complexity of... Wait, would this even affect the capital gains treatment of assets held in joint?" She stopped herself, shook her head. "See? I can't even turn it off. This won't work. You deserve someone who can actually focus on you, Anakin." Anakin looked ahead at the moonlit lake. "If you don't like me, just say it. No need to bring your tax returns into it." "Tax returns?" Padme's face went cold. "Don't ruin a good night by bringing up tax returns." She let out a breath. "Look, you'd genuinely be better off with another Jedi. I mean it. I'm exceptionally annoying and difficult to be around." "So am I," Anakin countered. "They cancel each other out." Padme considered, leaning against the stone railing. "I'm not sure how things work in your world," Anakin said. "But people discuss things and make the best choice, right? That's how decisions happen." "Yes," Padme said, though behind that single word she knew most decisions were settled in backroom negotiations, long before any bill reached the floor. Debates and votes were just theater for the HoloNet. "Then let me present my case. Why we'd work." "You know what? Fine." Padme gestured at the open space between them. "The floor is yours." She stepped back. Anakin straightened. "We both live on Coruscant. We both work for the Senate." Padme caught that phrasing. She was the Senate, as she often reminded herself, but didn't stop him. "We're both clearly skilled in our respective fields," he added, struggling to identify further commonalities. The Chancellor waited for more arguments when Anakin's expression changed. "I sense something." "What's wrong?" Padme asked. Anakin's gaze dropped to the stone beneath them. She followed his line of sight and saw the hairline fracture spreading across the terrace surface. Padme felt herself falling as the stone suddenly gave way beneath her. Anakin jumped clear before the section under him collapsed as well, twisting mid-air to reach out through the Force and pull her toward him. He landed by the doorway with her on solid ground. A pained scream came from the balcony directly below. They rushed down to find Obi-Wan pinned beneath a slab of broken terrace, the stone pressing against his back. Jar Jar Binks was attempting to lift it, gripping one edge while straining upward. The stone rose inches before slipping and slamming back down. Obi-Wan cursed. Jar Jar tried again. Same result. On the third attempt, Obi-Wan's profanities reached new creative heights. Bail Organa rushed in to join the Gungan. Together, they lifted the stone higher before it slipped again. Finally, a KX droid strode over, lifting it off Obi-Wan. Soon, droids were inspecting the damaged balcony, while medical personnel attended to Obi-Wan. After running diagnostics, one droid suggested the collapse may have resulted from structural degradation. The wing was old and appeared rarely maintained. "Makes sense," Padme said. "The villa's centuries old. We're out here maybe once every few years. I should have someone keep an eye on this place." Once Obi-Wan was loaded into the shuttle, Padme and Anakin watched it disappear toward Theed's medical facilities. "And I can save you from situations like that," Anakin said. Padme replied, looking at him. "How would you know it won't work unless we give it a try?" She let out a breath. "All right, we do have some things in common, and you did just spare me several broken bones at minimum. The Council and my office have been discussing a Jedi security detail for me," she continued. "I'll formally request you be assigned to it. We'll have time together, see where this goes. Does the representative from the Jedi Order approve this measure?" Anakin's face brightened. The representative votes yes. They smiled at each other. Behind them came the sound of shattering glass. Jar Jar had been constructing an ambitious champagne tower when someone backed into it. Anakin turned to watch as the Gungan and the culprit tumbled to the floor, grappling amid the wreckage. Guests surrounded the fighters, chanting for blood. Anakin watched the spectacle. Padme watched Anakin. Her smile faded. Over the following months, Anakin's assignment to Padme's security detail kept them in close proximity. They married within the year. When Anakin contacted his mother to invite her to the ceremony, Shmi told him to send holos. She'd watch them when she had time. She was busy hunting Tuskens with her family, apparently. She muttered something about politicians and poor life choices before ending the transmission. Anakin sent the wedding footage through the comm network. It remained marked as unseen for months. A year after Palpatine's death, Count Dooku initiated the Clone Wars, deploying separatist droids against Republic worlds, after ensuring the Kaminoans invoiced the Jedi for an unordered clone army. Casualties mounted, but military stocks soared faster. Senators and separatist delegates invested heavily in arms manufacturers across the conflict, many using shell companies to hold positions in manufacturers supplying the other side. With Palpatine dead and Amidala impossible to manipulate against the Jedi, Dooku pivoted to an alternative, the Death Star, a planet killer the Geonosians had designed for him. The superweapon required capital beyond the separatist movement's reach. His proposal to the corporate council: initiate war, generate massive profits through military operations, then end the conflict and redirect those funds toward construction. Once operational, they'd destroy the Republic capital and the Jedi in one strike. The galaxy would be theirs. They agreed. The war began. After 3 years, with profits exceeding estimates, Dooku moved to end the conflict and begin construction. The corporate council resisted. The war had become an unprecedented money printer. Why shut it down for an uncertain superweapon requiring decades to complete, with unpredictable outcomes they might not even live to see? Even Poggle doubted its feasibility. Dooku had underestimated greed. The separatist corporate council found their solution. Dooku had to go. With General Grievous in command, the war would continue. The cyborg knew nothing of Dooku's larger plot. Through their networks, they leaked intelligence that would allow the Jedi to eliminate him. The RSB had anticipated this betrayal, though not this soon. Padme had maintained embedded assets in separatist networks for years without activation. The war remained profitable for her allies in both the Senate and the Order. But with the corporate council moving against their own leader, the Confederacy's structure was collapsing. The war would end regardless. Better to control how. The RSB Director of Operations received the command to proceed. Embedded assets in Dooku's information streams fed him intelligence. comm transmission logs showing corporate council members plotting against him, coordinating with outside forces. Routed through his own security channels, the evidence appeared to come from loyal operatives. Disgusted that they'd chosen profit over lasting peace, he summoned the corporate council to Sereno under the pretense of urgent strategy discussions. He executed them all. Dooku moved to contain the damage, disseminating cover stories through separatist networks. A rogue banking clan faction had targeted Sand Hill, killing the rest of the council in the process. He couldn't blame the Republic, not when he was actively pursuing peace negotiations with them. He'd been attempting to reach General Grievous throughout. The cyborg remained unreachable. Dooku assumed the council's assassins had eliminated him first, though something about the situation felt wrong. Dooku's senses were proven right when, days later, Grievous stood before the Republic Senate, testifying that Dooku had perverted the separatist cause into profiteering and murdered the corporate council for power. The separatist alliance collapsed, its head of state exposed as a murderous traitor by his own top general. The maneuver had been surgical. A direct strike on Dooku using the council's intelligence would have left Grievous commanding the droid armies. Messy aftermath, no clean ending. Allowing Dooku's peace negotiations would have preserved an independent separatist state. Again, no clear victory for Amidala. But by engineering Dooku's elimination of the corporate council, and then having Grievous expose him, she destroyed everything in one move. Dooku discredited and hunted. His political support evaporated. The corporate council dead by his own hand, Grievous neutralized as a turncoat, and the entire separatist alliance decapitated. No leadership, no legitimacy, no structure. The war was over. Victory belonged to the Republic and to her, securing her position as the Chancellor who delivered peace. The groundwork had taken years. RSP assets embedded in Grievous's command structure had spent that time creating fractures between him and Dooku, small contradictions, delayed communications, subtle implications of mistrust. When the moment arrived, those same operatives delivered an intelligence report. Dooku planned to make peace by eliminating the corporate council and executing Grievous as an offering to the Republic. Grievous disappeared from all communication channels, weighing the claim. Then the corporate council died on Sereno. With their warning validated, the embedded agents closed in carefully. His only path was to approach the Republic and expose Dooku. Any alternative ended with his death. The cyborg, as always, chose survival. Grievous received his pardon and returned to his homeworld. Months later, Obi-Wan Kenobi tracked him down and killed him, dismembering him into 100 pieces, incinerating the remains, then stomping on the ashes while cursing the cyborg's mother for ever bringing such a being into existence. The execution had nothing to do with war crimes. Rather, the Jedi Master considered the unforgivable offense to be Grievous's collection of lightsabers and his audacity to wield four simultaneously as a non-force sensitive, behavior Kenobi characterized as edgy and warranting immediate termination. The war's end solidified Padme as the galaxy's most noble leader. The selfless chancellor who'd negotiated peace, exposed Count Dooku's treachery, then offered aid packages and preferential trade agreements to former separatist worlds, even apologizing for the previous administration's incompetence that had allowed the crisis to escalate. The holonet portrayed her as incorruptible, compassionate, everything the Republic needed. This reverence, combined with her power, made opposition unthinkable. Calls for lifetime appointment emerged organically, or seemed to. Throughout the 3-year conflict, she'd ensured Anakin's every victory dominated media cycles. His impossible rescues, battlefield brilliance, compassion for clone troopers, all broadcast relentlessly until he became the galaxy's most famous being, a household name from core to outer rim. The hero of the Republic, that adoration, combined with Senate's backing and Yoda's spice habits finally catching up to him, guaranteed Anakin's ascension to Grand Master. Roughly a quarter century had passed since the war's end, and the discovery of Count Dooku's corpse in a spice den on Nar Shaddaa. Supreme Chancellor Amidala, who had secured a lifetime appointment to the post, and Grandmaster Skywalker took their 2 children to a nightclub that Anakin and Obi-Wan had frequented during the Clone Wars. The couple appeared unchanged from the war's end decades prior, frozen in their youth through unorthodox Force rituals Anakin had pulled from restricted Jedi archives. They donned simple disguises, but anonymity came less from the disguises themselves than from context. No one expected the most powerful couple in the galaxy at a place like this, so patrons looked past them without recognition. After burning through a few thousand credits on shockball wagers and working through several bottles of spirits, the family claimed a booth. The twins, 26 now, though their parents treated them as if they were still younglings, settled in as Anakin began recounting how he'd met their mother, building toward the balcony confession at Varikino under the moonlight. "Sometimes," he declared, grinning at Padme, "you have to take initiative and damage a balcony or two." Padme gasped, theatrically. "You didn't." She laughed, then said she'd known within minutes, kept him around initially because she thought he was some separatist operative. Eventually realized he just loved her. Had to respect the audacity of the act, and besides, it wouldn't have been a deadly fall anyway. Anakin laughed. "In my defense, I was completely drunk at the time. Seemed perfectly logical." Padme raised her glass. "To our relationship's strong foundation." Their children lifted their drinks as well. This wasn't the strangest story their parents had told them. They drank, setting their glasses down. Anakin leaned back. "What's with the surprised act, though? I told you about this years ago." She looked at him for a moment and said, "No, you haven't." She shook her head, disappointment manifesting on features untouched by time. "You know, now that I think about it, maybe I should have had you killed back then. What do you think about that?" Anakin leaned forward. "Wouldn't have worked. Those RSB idiots would have had their limbs ripped apart before they even got close to me." The discussion evolved into tactical analysis, each methodically dissecting security procedures, temporal windows, and strategic vulnerabilities through which one might have eliminated the other. Their children sank deeper into the booth, hoping to avoid conscription. Leia's datapad chimed. She triggered it herself, and she held it up, blocking her face as though absorbed in urgent holomail. The sound drew both parents' attention. Padme looked from her daughter's hidden face to Luke, who was drinking and studying the ceiling as though he'd discovered something worth examining in the panels overhead. "I know my son agrees with me." Luke's eyes shifted to Anakin, who returned the look with an expression that clearly said, "No, you agree with me." Luke kept the glass pressed to his mouth, still drinking. Both parents stared at him, waiting for him to pick a side in their theoretical murder plot. Salvation arrived from an unexpected source, a stranger's head appearing over the top of their booth, worn features, eyes that had made this pitch 1,000 times. "Do you want to buy some death sticks?"